Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Orange Bowl, played New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2015, between the Oklahoma Sooners and the Clemson Tigers, as these two teams were going at it in the semifinal for the playoff for the national championship. So Bob Stoops and the Sooners going against Dabo Swinney and the Tigers, as the Tigers were undefeated heading into this game, the Sooners having only lost one game. And Oklahoma would get the ball first, and they would start things off on their own 25. And they ended up with a sack on the first play. Carlos Watkins sacked Mayfield, but then Oklahoma got moving, and they got the ball up into midfield and into Clemson territory. And on 3rd and 3 from the Clemson 32, Baker Mayfield hit Dede Westbrook for a 10-yard reception that made a first down at the Clemson 22. Mayfield then went to Mark Andrews. He picked up 21 yards, and it was all the way down to the 1-yard line. He almost got it in the end zone, but on 2nd and goal from the 1, Samaje Perine scored the 1-yard touchdown. He pounded in there. Austin Siebert hit the extra point, and the Sooners were up 7-0 over the Tigers early on, with a little over 11 minutes still left in the first quarter. So the Sooners score on their first possession. The Tigers would end up punting after 6 plays on their first possession, and then the Tigers forced the Sooners to go 3 and out on their second possession. Shaq Lawson came up with a big sack on 3rd and 9, and that pushed Oklahoma back to their own 4-yard line as they would punt the ball. And Clemson would end up taking over on the Oklahoma 28 as the punt went out of bounds. So Clemson taking over in field goal range, and they would end up getting down to the 6-yard line, but then they lost some yards, and their drive would stall on the 9, and out would come Greg Hujo to kick a 26-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, as the Tigers put their first points on the board to cut the Sooners' lead to 4. So 7-3 with less than 4 minutes left in the first quarter. Oklahoma would then take over after the kickoff, but after 9 plays, they would end up punting as they brought the first quarter to a close, and they punted on the first play of the second quarter from the Clemson 37. So now the Tigers would take over, backed up against their own end zone on their own 4-yard line, but on first down, Deshaun Watson runs it 46 yards for the first down at midfield at the 50. Then on 3rd and 4, an incomplete pass would bring up 4th down. They elected to go for it. And on this one, you had Andy Teasdale complete a pass to Christian Wilkins for 31 yards. And now it's a first down in the red zone for Clemson at the Oklahoma 13. Ray McLeod ran it 8 yards. And now it was 2nd and 2 at the 5. And Deshaun Watson takes it in himself. A 5-yard touchdown. Hugo added the extra point, and now the Tigers were in the lead 10-7 with a little less than 13 minutes left before halftime. The Sooners would end up punting after 7 plays on the possession that followed, and now the Tigers would take over on their own 19-yard line. They brought the ball up to midfield and into Oklahoma territory. They got all the way down to the 11, but then Frank Shannon sacked Watson, pushing him back a yard, and then another sack on the next play. And with an intentional grounding penalty, it would now be 4th and 10 at the 19, and Hugo would come out to kick a 36-yard field goal. It was good, and it was now 13-7 with just over 7 minutes left to play as the Tigers extended their lead to 6. So now the Sooners would take over on their own 28 after the kickoff, and they ended up faced with a 2nd and 9, and a 27-yard pass from Mayfield to Shepard, plus a penalty for sideline interference, and now they were in Clemson territory. Then on 3rd and 4 from the 23, Mayfield went to Shepard. He picked up 19 on first down at the 4, but they would not be able to get it into the end zone. They ended up losing a yard, and they would have to kick a 22-yard field goal on 4th and goal from the 5. As Austin Siebert came out, he put it through the uprights, and now it was 13-10 as the Sooners cut the lead to 3 for the Tigers. So now the Tigers would take over with less than 5 minutes left before halftime. They headed on their own 25 to start the drive. They got up to midfield pretty quick and into Oklahoma territory, but their drive would stall on the 26. Now came Hugo to kick a 43-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and it was back to a 6-point lead for the Tigers with just over 2 minutes left before halftime with the score 16-10. So now Oklahoma would get the ball after the kickoff on their own 24. Mayfield went to Perrine, and he picked up 20 yards to make it a first down at the 44. Then on 2nd and 7, Mayfield goes to Westbrook. He picked up 42 yards and a first down in the red zone at the Clemson 11-yard line. And then Mayfield goes to Mark Andrews for the 11-yard touchdown. Siebert adds the extra point, and it was now 17-16 as the Sooners took the lead by 1 with about a minute and a half left before halftime. Clemson now would take over on their own 19 after the kickoff, and they would move the ball into Oklahoma territory when Watson hit peak for a 26-yard reception on 1st and 10 from the 30 to bring the ball to the 44. Then on 3rd and 10 from the 44, Watson ran it 12 yards for a first down to the 32. And then a penalty for pass interference would make it a first down in the red zone at the 17. But then on 3rd and 8 from the 15, Deshaun Watson was intercepted by Zach Sanchez in the end zone. And so Oklahoma stops Clemson from taking back the lead right there before halftime. So at halftime, 17-16. It was a very competitive first half, a lot of back and forth action, and Oklahoma would lead by 1 at halftime. But then coming out for the second half, Clemson would get the ball first to start things off in the third quarter. They'd start off with it on their own 25, and they would move it down into Oklahoma territory. They got down into the red zone, a 3rd and 5 from the Oklahoma 15. Watson went to Renfro. He picked up 11 and a first down at the 4. Watson then runs it 3 yards to make it 2nd and goal on the 1, and Wayne Gallman scores on the 1-yard touchdown run. Hugo has the extra point, and it was now 23-17 as the Tigers took back the lead with 11 minutes still left in the third quarter. So now Oklahoma would get the ball. They would go 3 and out as Mayfield got sacked on 3rd down by Kevin Dodd. And out would come the punting unit, and Clemson would take over on their own 39. They would get down to the Oklahoma 30, and Hugo would come out to attempt a 47-yard field goal, but it was no good. So it remained 23-17 with a little less than 8 minutes left in the third. Now Oklahoma would take over on their own 31. They got down into Clemson territory, and they were faced with a 4th and 1 on the 30. They gave it to Perrine, and he was not able to pick up the first down. And so it was a turnover on downs for the Sooners. Now Clemson would take over on their own 30. Gallman ran for 21 on first down to make it a first down at the 49. Then it's 2nd and 4. A penalty against the Sooners for offside to make it a first down at the 38. And on 2nd and 7 from the 35, Watson gets it to Hunter Renfro for a 35-yard touchdown. And with the extra point by Hugo, it was 30-17 with just over 4 minutes still left in the third. So now Oklahoma would take over on their own 25. They would get down into Clemson territory. But on 2nd and 10 from the 40, Baker Mayfield was intercepted by B.J. Goodson, and now Clemson would take over. They would go 3 and out on the possession and punt the ball back to Oklahoma, who would also go 3 and out, as they would punt it right back to Clemson, who would take over and bring the third quarter to a close and open up the fourth quarter with the ball on their own 45, but they got it into Oklahoma territory soon thereafter. They would get down into the red zone when on 3rd and 3 from the 20. Gallman picked up 7 yards to make it a first down at the 13. Then on 3rd and 1 from the 4, Gallman runs it into the end zone, a 4-yard touchdown run. And with the extra point by Hugo, it was 37-17 as Clemson was now up by 20 points with less than 11 minutes left to play in the fourth quarter. So now Oklahoma would take over on their own 25. They'd get the ball to midfield and into Clemson territory. They got all the way down to the 5-yard line, but on 1st and goal, Baker Mayfield was intercepted by Ben Boulware, and so now Clemson would take over on the 11-yard line. They would end up punting after 6 plays on this possession. Oklahoma would get the ball back, but they went 3 and out, and so now Clemson would get the ball, and they would bring this game to a close by running out the clock. and on fourth down, they just threw the ball into the stands, and this game is over. Clemson remains undefeated. A very dominant second half by the Tigers after a very tightly contested first half between these two teams. Clemson makes the halftime adjustments. Dabo Swinney comes up big time with Clemson, and his defense shuts out the Sooners in the second half while scoring 3 touchdowns. Of course, coming up big in that third quarter. That third quarter was so wild, I started to lose track of time. I thought the game was over after the third quarter. Just the way the momentum and the energy felt like the game was over with still a quarter left to play, and just all the air had been let out of the Sooners. It was such an exciting game there in that first half, but in the second half, Clemson really shut the door on Oklahoma, and they are moving on to the final. They will be playing in the national championship game. That's going to be on Monday, January 11th, still a ways away, but they waited a while to play this one. They hadn't played in almost a month, but they come up big time as they didn't seem to have any rust on either end. I mean, they were really firing on both teams, in that first half. But Clemson in the second half really coming up strong. They won the battle of the trenches up front with their defensive line putting on the pressure. Also, their secondary coming up big with those picks. Also, the Clemson ground game just very dominant in this one. Let's actually look at the stats, and we'll see just how dominant they were on the ground. Especially, they had 312 rushing yards for the Tigers versus 67 for the Sooners, and that's in the ground attack. Total passing yards, 311 for Oklahoma, 218 for Clemson, but total yards overall, 530 for Clemson, 378 for Oklahoma. Let's look at the quarterbacks for both these two teams. And of course, Deshaun Watson coming up big time in this game. He had 332 total yards in this game and 2 touchdowns, as he was 16 for 31 with 187 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Of course, that was at the end of the first half, or else they might have took the lead right before halftime. But they did end up with 21 unanswered points to close this game out. But he also had 24 carries for 145 rushing yards for Deshaun Watson and a rushing touchdown. Wayne Gallman also 26 carries for 150 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns for Gallman. And Artavis Scott, 5 catches for 63 yards. Hunter Renfrow, 4 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown. And for Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield, 26 for 41, 311 passing yards, 1 touchdown, but the 2 interceptions. And Shamaje Perine came up with 15 carries for 58 yards and a touchdown. And then Sterling Shepard, 7 catches for 87 yards, and D.D. Westbrook, 4 catches for 69 yards. But going back to the team stats, Clemson had 30 first downs, 24 first downs for Oklahoma. On third down, Clemson was 9 of 19, and Oklahoma 5 of 13. Like I said, total yards overall, 530 for Clemson, 378 for Oklahoma. And on the ground, Clemson 312 yards versus 67 for Oklahoma. And through the air, 311 for Oklahoma, 218 for Clemson. Both teams had 5 penalties, 65 penalty yards against the Sooners, 40 penalty yards against the Tigers. Of course, the 2 interceptions for Oklahoma, 1 interception for Clemson. Both those interceptions coming there in the second half. And then the time of possession, 35 minutes, 15 seconds for Clemson, 24 minutes, 45 seconds for Oklahoma in this game. So a huge win for Clemson as they win the Orange Bowl. They're going to be moving on to that national championship game, and it's just a matter of seeing who they're going to face. Will it be Michigan State, or will it be Alabama, as they're going to be facing off in the Cotton Bowl? So we'll be watching to see what happens in that one. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a great week and having a great weekend and a happy new year and enjoying all the sports.